Members, we have a quorum. Now, items since the last meeting, follow-up items. This subcommittee invited public submissions. The government offered a consolidated reply in writing, and those documents have been forwarded to members on the 26th of November 2024 for members' reference. Now, today we will be discussing promotion of the development of vocational and development professional education and training. In accordance with Rule 83A of the Rules of Procedure, if members have any direct or indirect pecuniary interest in the item under discussion, please disclose the nature of such interest before you speak. We now invite the Undersecretary for Education, Mr. Jeff C., and Professor Charles Kwong, Vice President of the Hong Kong Metropolitan University. Joining us is also Mr. Casper Ng, Principal Assistant Secretary for Education. Members who wish to speak, please press the Request to Speak button. We will first hear from Dr. Jeff C., the Undersecretary. He will walk us through paper CB bracket 3939/2024 bracket 01. Undersecretary, good morning, everyone. Vocational and Professional Education and Training, or VPAT, is an integral part of the education system of Hong Kong. We want students to go as far as their potential will take them. So at different levels, we take a multi-pronged approach to VPAT, and that exists alongside traditional academic education. This is in line with our country's strategy. And the strategy is one of fostering industry-institution collaboration and diversified development. It's also about articulation between vocational and academic studies, integration between industries and education, and collaboration between institutions and enterprises. The 2023 policy address proposes turning Hong Kong into an international post-secondary education hub and a cradle of future talent. We want talent from far and wide and nurture a wide range of talent. Now, as industries change, technologies change, we need applied talent, and that's a growing demand. We take a range of measures to step up the quality of the local VPAT options so that the talent can play a role to support our growth. VPAT, in relation to our development into an international education hub, plays a key role. VPAT proceeds in parallel with the traditional academic stream, and it complements the academic stream. We get a wider range of talent, and that also means a wider range of options for students. The 2023 policy address also proposed the establishment of universities of applied sciences, and that will mean a pathway to success for young people who aspire to careers in professional skills sectors. The Hong Kong Metropolitan University and St. Francis University have met the criteria and have now become the first two UASs. In November 2024, with the startup fund of $100 million, the Alliance of UASs has been set up. As the government steps up support for these universities and also positions these VPAT programs at the degree level, VPAT is covering a wider range of options and moving along the path of high-quality development. For local and non-local youth, this offers a range of progression pathways. VPAT also helps bring talent from overseas. With the alliance of UASs and also institutions under the Vocational Training Council, as well as help from industry players, VPAT can foster collaboration between Hong Kong and the mainland and overseas, and that fosters interaction among institutions so that they promote VPAT in Hong Kong. This can also promote the study in Hong Kong brand. This will foster Hong Kong's VPAT development. We're glad to have the Vice President, Professor Charles Kwong from HKMU, with us. HKMU is Hong Kong's first UAS. That university is also the secretariat of the alliance. Professor Kwong will briefly tell us the preliminary plans for the way forward of this alliance and also collaboration that HKMU is engaged in. I now give the floor to Professor Kwong. Thank you, Chairman. I want to briefly report on our work, and that comes in two parts. First, the work for the year ahead, and second, I want to discuss our university as an example in the specific work we will engage in as a UAS. Now, part one. On the 11th of November this year, we set up the Alliance of Universities of Applied Sciences. We now have 4 members, 2 full members, and also associate members. Before this alliance came into being, we reached preliminary agreements with 80 supporting organizations. They pledged support. These organizations cover chambers of commerce, businesses, professional bodies, and also non-government as well as quasi-government organizations. We will work with these bodies. When collaboration comes up, we talk to these bodies separately and then we reach deals. As the Undersecretary said, on the 11th of November this year, we set up the alliance. We set up a steering committee. That committee advises us and also reviews our finances. Now, the work in the year ahead. Specifics are now on stream for some initiatives. This week, we will hold an international conference. So, internationally, how a UAS should operate. That's what the conference will look at. We will do 2 exchange tours. We've started talks with the Education Bureau. So the 2 tours will cover both the mainland and overseas. One for the mainland, the other overseas. One task involves outreach and collaboration with other institutions. At the bottom, you see the point about promoting UASs, both at home and abroad. We want greater awareness and also raise the status of VPAT. I've just covered the work of the alliance. Now for Hong Kong MU, which is the first UAS. Now I want to give you a quick idea of what we have done and what our plans are for the future. Over the recent years, we have taken an applied focus. When the pilot scheme came out, we responded actively. 2 of our programs are now under the pilot program or project on the development of applied degree programs, and they are integrated testing, inspection and certification, and sports and recreation management. We have more ambitious plans than just 2 programs. At the bottom, in the blue box, you see different programs: creative arts, testing and certification, nursing, physiotherapy, energy and environmental studies. These are areas that are progressing fast, and these are relatively large programs. Over the past couple of months, we went overseas and to the mainland for exchange tours. We reached memoranda of understanding. Now, we have signed an MOU with High Point University of Applied Sciences. This month, we will do a seminar with that university, and it's timely. The focus will be on the role of the government in collaboration between the government, industry, and university. This is to create impactful outcomes, and that will happen this month. With High Point, we're also in talks about a dual degree program. Again, in Germany, our president and vice president met with people from UAS 7 from Germany, and that's the largest UAS alliance. There are 7 key universities in Germany. Now, we have been in talks with 3 such universities: HM Munich University of Applied Sciences will work with us. We also had an in-depth discussion with the chairman of the UAS, and that's Professor Frank Delman. The mainland is also our focus. We will forge ties with the mainland. We're not after the number of MOU we have. After each MOU is reached, we need specific collaboration, and that can mean dual degree programs or collaborative research or simply interaction between teachers and students. The number matters, but the quality also matters. Over the recent weeks, we have signed memoranda of understanding with these universities. The second last one, Toulouse School of Management in France. A dual degree program with that university has started. Now, with different industry institutions, for each program, we have an advisor. At least half of those advisors will come from the industry. These 4 examples are popular programs, and one of them is about training pilots, and that has been covered extensively in the media. Now, here you see a list of agreements with different bodies, NGOs. This is not an exhaustive list. The list is here to show you where students will undertake their internships. Now, some recent events. We're grateful to the Secretary for taking us to the EAIE annual conference. There was an exhibition in Toulouse as well, and we will take an active part in talks about UASs. We will also be rolling out events over the past couple of days. Now, we also saw the Global University President and Leaders Summit. Our university will be in charge of the part about UASs. We have admitted more non-local students. Those include overseas students. We have to provide services, so we provide more hostel places, and this is important. Now, MU Achievers scheme you see in the middle of the slide covers a range of events. We put students from different nationalities together. We want local students involved with their non-local peers so that non-local students can integrate into the local community. We also offer basic Cantonese classes to these non-local students. Over the past year and in the year ahead, we have focused and we will focus on a few areas. First, we want to become a good UAS. Second, collaboration with not just the mainland but also overseas. 3, we want to promote UASs. We want to raise their status and raise their awareness both at home and abroad. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Kwong. I now open the floor for questions from members. Mr. Lam Chun Sing, Ms. Lillian Kwok, and Mrs. Regina Ip. Mr. Lam Chun Sing. Thank you, Chairman. The paper discusses VPAT extensively. The meeting today is about turning Hong Kong into an international education hub. The paper doesn't say how VPAT can help Hong Kong become such a hub. Professor Kwong gave us extra details about our alliance of UASs and also the work of the Hong Kong Metropolitan University in terms of its global ties. Our goal is to become an international education hub. That means probably more non-local students for our VPAT programs. The VTC already has non-local students. The UASS will also have non-local students. After these students complete their VPAT programs, some of them will get to stay here and work here. So I hope that VPAT should be more than just about bringing in non-local workers. We should create a brand out of our VPAT programs so that we draw students from far and wide to come here. Take the F&B sector. There's a program about catering in France. The students there in that program may not stay in France, but that program is recognized globally. So can we have signature programs here so that mainland students and students overseas will come here? These students may not stay here after finishing the program. They may return to their home countries, but that program will still be recognized in their home countries. I know this may be challenging. For parents, students, and the community at large, VPAT seems like the lesser option. You have to be convinced that VPAT is attractive, and only then you can promote that to young people elsewhere. So does the government have plans to turn a number of VPAT programs into signature programs, and then the alliance can focus on the publicity for those programs?
My second question is, the LWB released the latest manpower projections recently, and we are short 180,000 in labor, it seems. We need the middle tier skilled talents, applied science talents, especially in INT and AI. With the development of VPAT, will we go along the direction of the manpower projections and do more in these areas so that we can nurture local or non-local talents? Will you deploy more resources to nurture talents in such areas? We also have the SSSDP that has been launched some time ago. Can we include some of the programs in the areas in the SSSDP so that we will have, say, applied degree programs or UAS courses that can be covered by the SSSDP that will be an incentive for youngsters to take such programs? Thank you. Well, I'll assign a 5-minute time limit. I forgot to mention that earlier. Thank you. Dr. Jeffsey. Well, the two questions of the member are interrelated, so I will give a consolidated response. Indeed, according to the latest manpower projections, we do need manpower in certain areas, and in certain areas we are short on labor. Mr. Lam mentioned SSSDP earlier. This program subsidizes certain programs, and this program also targets courses that are short on labor. When this program was launched, it was mostly for self-financing courses. In 2019-20 academic year, this program was expanded to cover some sub-degree programs. So it's no longer just self-financing undergraduate programs. As for whether certain areas that would require manpower, whether we would deploy more resources, the member asked, we would definitely do that. In order to make Hong Kong into an international education hub, it's not just about nurturing local talents anymore. We need to enhance collaboration and exchange with overseas and mainland institutions for this. Apart from attracting non-local students to come to Hong Kong, we need to encourage further exchanges between local institutions and mainland and overseas institutions in research and development, as well as to create a more diverse learning environment for local students. These are all important for Hong Kong's development into an international education hub. Professor Kwong talked about how in the MU they use different ways to promote this. We will also enhance publicity. In fact, we have a specific working group for developing VPAT. As for how we can create a brand, in the alliance of the UASs, we will continue to work on this to see how we can create a brand, and through the alliance of the UAS, we can step up publicity and promotion. Thank you. Ms. Lillian Kwok. Thank you, Chair. I heard what the MU said in their presentation. I do appreciate their efforts. I have some questions. We have been trying to promote VPAT. I want to know the government's stance on a particular issue. There are some programs that are subsidized, but for citizens, they still have the impression that only traditional university programs are subsidized. Would the government consider making adjustments so that UASs would be UGC-funded universities as well? Also, I believe US programs will be recognized by the HKCAFQ. I believe the qualifications framework is equivalent to qualifications recognized by overseas frameworks as well. How can we make sure there is recognition for UAS programs as well? Because if we are to promote the programs overseas, we must make sure they are recognized and there is an equivalent qualifications level if we are to become an international education hub. Apart from creating a study in Hong Kong brand, we need to make sure that people know what they're learning in Hong Kong. And also, we need to make sure we can tie in with international standards and the latest situation in development overseas. How can we make sure we have our programs updated to meet that? Now, I heard the Undersecretary talk much about VPAT, how we have various programs, and especially the MU, they have been working with Yan Oi Tong to implement QF level 1 to 3 certificates at Yan Oi Tong, and then level 4 to 6 courses would be undertaken at the MU. Would the MU consider working with other institutions in the mainland and Southeast Asia so that we will have similar progress paths or career paths for other students from other countries and regions. Also, can you make sure there is better interfacing with secondary schools so that for those who have undertaken foundation courses can progress to the MU courses later? Thank you. Undersecretary. Well, unfortunately, not all universities will become UGC-funded universities, because we believe private and UGC-funded universities complement each other. For UGC-funded universities, they have triennial plans. Private universities would be more flexible in this regard. They can change their programs a little more quickly to meet the needs of society. However, it does not mean that self-financing institutions do not receive any support. We have support in terms of granting of land as well as subsidies. For students undertaking sub-degree programs at self-financing institutions, they would be receiving subsidies on a non-means tested basis if necessary. As for what the members said about exporting our tertiary education to elsewhere, I believe with publicity, and as the professor said earlier, with our promotion work overseas, the study in Hong Kong brand, there is really no distinction between UGC-funded universities and self-financing universities. In fact, the MU participated in it. That demonstrates that we are like Hong Kong team institutions trying to promote education in general in Hong Kong. I'm not sure if it is what the member meant, but basically we have been promoting the different characteristics of different institutions so that people will know more about the education system in Hong Kong, and that would in turn breed collaboration opportunities between institutions. On a secondary level, there are some secondary school courses that are recognized by the qualifications framework, but in general, while we do have applied learning courses in secondary schools, that would already be breeding interest in youngsters in applied learning programs. They would build a basic awareness through such courses. After they completed their secondary school curriculum, they may choose to work, but they may also go for further study, and we now have a clear pathway in the form of applied degree programs or other career-oriented programs that students may opt for. Thank you. Mrs. Regina Ip. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Kwong for giving a presentation. The paper is about promoting the development of UASs. I support that. We have a problem in Hong Kong. Parents want their children to go into academia. They don't want them to go into vocational education and training courses. In paragraph 11 of the paper, it does say footnote 1, we would have some programs. I do approve of this, but I wonder why this is not discussed in the in a meeting of the panel on education. Why is it discussed here? Because while Professor Kwong did talk about collaborating with overseas institutions, it does not necessarily mean Hong Kong has become an international education hub. Let me give you an example. In Singapore, they have a department to construct global education and knowledge hub. There are media reports on this. They have attracted well-known overseas institutions to go to Singapore to set up campuses. They have Yale, INSEAD, NYU, and University of New South Wales. But Hong Kong has seen institutions leaving. In fact, we have had the University of Chicago abandon their Mount Davis campus. We have the University of New South Wales not having enough students. And these have failed in Singapore. We never discuss this issue. We never discuss their experience. So we aren't learning a lesson here. If I heard it right, the undersecretary has now become a doctor. We need to talk about this in depth. We cannot just say we are an international education hub. We have the University of Chicago campus here, but they do not have resources. We have land granted to them, but they are getting their resources from the Jockey Club. I think we need to be frank in the paper so that we wouldn't give people overly high expectations. Thank you.
Thank you. On our efforts to turn Hong Kong into an international education hub, as we said at our last meeting, the paper for our last meeting, there's no universal definition on an international education hub. That hub usually involves a group of well-known universities, and you have highly internationalized universities. Undersecretary, by hub, we are talking about a cluster of universities. In some cases, the universities spawned organically, like in Boston or in Beijing. But here in Hong Kong, we lack those conditions. So please be accurate with the wording in your paper. I know you are very well educated. Mrs. Ib, in April this year, the panel on education did have a discussion on an international education hub. You cannot say there is no definition. When you say a hub, it has to be a cluster. Some hubs emerge organically. Other places prefer government intervention. Singapore goes for intervention. Correct me if I'm wrong, Undersecretary. Thank you. Now, internationalization at institutions is usually reflected in the mix of staff and students. More non-local students and staff, higher level of internationalization. Another focus is visiting scholars and also learning activities or learning experiences. Internationalization also hinges on academic collaboration, nationally and internationally. That also involves the design of and diversity of programs on offer. The policy addresses of this year and last year proposed a range of policy measures. Those measures are about expanding the capacity of local institutions. At different levels, there are different measures. There is now a higher cap on non-local students at universities. There is now also a Belt and Road scholarship. These measures are about turning Hong Kong into an education hub. The discussion today focuses on VPAT and our efforts to promote VPAT in Hong Kong. On different occasions, members have told us that in this pursuit, VPAT institutions and self-financing institutions can play a role. And that's what we are here discussing today. Got it. Now, also at the panel meeting in April this year, we discussed universities of applied sciences. In Singapore, their ITE cannot take in non-local students, so there is scope for us to do something. I have just one question for myself. HKMU and the other UAS are both self-financing universities. So when you admit non-local students, the non-local student will have to pay the non-local fee. But will you get a situation where the non-local student prefers the UGC-funded universities? Since they are paying the non-local fee anyway, this means they ditch the UASs. Mainland and overseas students looking for VPAT programs may not be able to afford the self-financing universities. Students who are more likely to be able to afford these programs may not be the people who are looking for the VPAT programs. The people looking at VPAT programs may be very budget conscious. So my question for the Undersecretary and Professor Kwong is that when you are looking at recruiting non-local students for your VPAT programs, have you given thought to this possible dilemma? Professor Kwong will take the question. Indeed, as a self-financing institution, we have our constraints. We have set of stipends and scholarships. Those are for non-local students to take the pressure off their finances. But we cannot cover all applicants. We became a UAS only in March this year. We're now planning more financial support in the future for students who are less than well-to-do. Once we have more details, we will talk to the Education Bureau and then we will report on our progress. Dr. Chow Man Kong. I was at the ceremony for the establishment of the UAS Alliance. I was glad to see that go through. But sadly, we were told just 2 universities were full members, and then there were 2 associate members. We could have let the public know beforehand. So transparency is wanting. The alliance has $100 million from the government. So what work would there be in terms of overseas research, collaboration? How will the alliance improve the image of UASs in the community? Now, for VPAT to be successful, we have to start at the secondary school level. Sticking to pass or failed at the DSE level will create the impression that VPAT is the lesser option. So what plans would there be? What plans does the Education Bureau have? Will there be a review? Now, we have covered the manpower projection. It's just a few years from now, 4 years from now, we will be short of 180,000 workers. And that's mostly in line with our previous projection. In many sectors, think construction, city management, and healthcare, accommodation, F&B, retail, F&B, we are short-staffed in those sectors. This may fall in the purview of not just the EDB. Other bureaus should be involved. So how do we nurture local talent through different measures. Now, there is something for the EDB, and that is there should be greater scope of participation for self-financing institutions. We should have more than just 3 or 4. We will be amending the post-secondary colleges ordinance next year, and this is top of mind for many people. This will have a bearing on our future VPAT. Are we actually acting on the problem, or are we simply sloganeering? Thank you. Professor Kwong has covered the work of the Alliance. There will be international conferences. Members of the Alliance will go overseas and to the mainland for exchange and collaboration. There will be collaborative research on applied education. Efforts will be made to attract VPAT talent to come here for studies. The alliance was set up only on the 11th of last month. As Professor Kwong said, there will be international conferences on the way forward for the alliance. For more specifics, we will be happy to have a discussion at the panel on education. I know this is close to the heart of many members we can give a more detailed report at the panel. On applied learning programs, indeed, there are differences in the hours and the assessments between Category A courses and Category B courses. The results from Category B courses can be seen as equivalent to level 4 of Category A courses. Some wonder if we can go one level higher to level 5. Now, we are in touch with different stakeholders, including the HKEAA and schools. We're in talks about whether that idea can work. Dr. Chow raised the third question about manpower, the labor crunch across industries. The EDB has been coordinating the work. We look at programs that can provide the manpower needed by certain sectors under the SSSDP. The EDB has been consulting different government departments on that. Jobs vary. We need the relevant policy bureaus to give us input. With that input, we can then choose programs that we put under the SSSDP. The work will continue. We will remain in close contact with those departments. Mr. Dennis Leung. Thank you. The discussion today is about VPAT. We now have universities of applied sciences. Students complete a degree. We want students to have the skills they need for the jobs. And we also have to cope with the labor crunch in Hong Kong. The manpower projection report came out previously. We're short-staffed in city management. And we have 2 UASs. There may be a couple more to come. These institutions will be rolling out degrees but we're missing something intermediate, and that is a diploma program, for example. So for the 14 institutions under the Vocational Training Council, how can we optimize the positioning and resources of those 14 institutions so that we can better connect those institutions with secondary schools? That way, students don't necessarily go to universities. Better linkage between the VTC institutions and secondary schools may result in better development for students. Last week, an apprentice of the VTC had an accident while repairing an escalator. That apprentice died. The VTC said, "Not my fault. It was about the contractor of the escalator." At that rate, parents may not really want to send their children to VPAT programs. We want better protection for students. Institutions and companies should take responsibility, so we should do better. So I hope the government can do something about this.
I also want to say this. For graduates, is it possible to guarantee that they would go into the industries they're supposed to go into? We did have some students going into courses, not necessarily the ones they like, but then because they could get into them. So they ended up not going into the industries after they graduated. How can we do more starting from the first year of their study, perhaps with some counseling or job matching, so that these students would know more about the industries early on, so that in the end, after they graduate, they would want to work in the industries? I want to hear from the government as to how we can do more in this. Thank you. Well, I do understand we are talking about promoting the development of VPAT. We need to tie in with the theme of the subcommittee that is promoting the development of Hong Kong into an international education hub. Otherwise, it would just be another meeting of the panel on education. Undersecretary. Thank you. Mr. Leung talked about the status of institutions. Indeed, in public impression, many students and parents think that after they have undertaken VPAT, they would need to undergo further study. For applied degree programs, we want to make sure what students study can be used in future in their work. That is, the programs would equip them with the right skills for work in future. As for how there can be better interfacing with secondary schools, the VTC has all along been working on this. For applied learning subjects, some of these are operated by one of the institutions under the VTC. That was exactly why the VTC was set up in the first place. As for what the member mentioned, a recent incident involving an escalator repair apprentice of the VTC, we find it deeply regrettable. We do note that the Labor Department has been following up on the incident, and a suspension notice was issued to the firm concerned, as mentioned in the policy address. We have the Ivy Kwaichung campus that is to be converted into a lift and escalator technology center of the VTC to support the development of work in this area. We have been liaising and will continue to liaise with the VTC on how to safeguard the safety of apprentices. Please rest assured, member, we take this very seriously. The third question that the member asked was about progression upon graduation. We did provide incentives, for example, the apprenticeship scheme and some assistance, financial assistance that would encourage students to undertake further study in the area for their work in future. But I think it requires not only the efforts of the government, it would also require the efforts of the industries. We should all work together to enhance support for students and raise the interest of students in working in the areas they studied in. Thank you. Now, Ms. Lillian Kwok speaking for the second round. Thank you. I thank the Undersecretary for providing further information on the issue. I also heard the Undersecretary say for self-financing institutions, there is financial assistance for applied learning programs. As some of the members said, there is a need to change public perception of FEPAT programs. So I urge the government to consider, apart from the 8 UGC-funded universities, we should have 1 or 2 UGC-funded UASs to show the importance that the government attaches to UASs. On promoting development of Hong Kong into an international education hub, one of the members asked about the definition of an international education hub, that Hong Kong should be a platform for institutions. We do have 5 of the Hong Kong UGC-funded universities being in the top 100 universities in the world. How can we make FEPAT institutions into something like this that would have status in the FEPAT rankings? I think this is exactly why we have this subcommittee. We need to develop Hong Kong into a platform that will make Hong Kong into an international education hub. So it's not just about publicity or promotion or having students partake in competitions. We can host international competitions ourselves. We do not only need to host international forums. That will also help us create a brand. Also, as I said earlier, how can we collaborate with mainland and overseas institutions better so that we are not visiting there only? We will also have them come to Hong Kong so that we can be an education hub in Southeast Asia or even East Asia in general. We have the country's support and we are well connected with the world. We can be a platform for both mainland and overseas institutions. If we have collaboration only in academia, I find it very disappointing. How can we do more in terms of government support? Can we adjust the ratio of government support for UGC-funded universities and FEPAT institutions so that we have more resources for FEPAT institutions to develop in this area? Would you have a future target ratio in mind. Thank you. Undersecretary. Thank you, Ms. Kwok. It is as Ms. Kwok said, we have 5 top 100 universities in the world in Hong Kong. In future, we have the alliances of UASs that can become a characteristic of Hong Kong's education system. We have had students take part in, say, the World Skills Competition. They have achieved very good results that demonstrates Hong Kong's excellence in VPAT too. We will do more in promotion in future to make sure we are promoting our advantages. With the VTC's promotion work in overseas, they have done much in that they have been trying to establish a network for collaboration. As at last academic year, the VTC has signed approximately 100 partnership agreements with institutions in the mainland overseas, including those in Canada, UK, Singapore, etc. We have been encouraging the VTC to establish partnerships with other institutions in the Belt and Road countries as well, and form partnerships. It's not just about the signing of memoranda of understanding. There are actual activities, for example, student exchange programs. For example, VTC has worked with the ITE in Singapore to form a 25-year partnership that started in 2007. Every 2 years, they would hold a student conference. This shows that VPAT institutions in Hong Kong have been actively expanding their overseas partnership network. Thank you. Chair, I have a follow-up question. Sure. With favorable conditions in Hong Kong, we have the country's support and we are well connected to the rest of the world. I hope the government can provide more support, not just in the form of supporting institutions to take part in international competitions, but to actually host international competitions in Hong Kong. Thank you, Undersecretary. We do note the members' comments. Thank you. Mrs. Regina Ip. Thank you, Chair. The paper's name, or the subject of the paper, is promoting the development of VPAT. I think this should be discussed at the panel on education. As Mr. Dennis Leung mentioned, there was a recent incident. There was an escalator repair apprentice dying while being an apprentice. That is not ideal, and I think this is an issue that should be discussed at the panel on education. We have been talking about through international exchange and collaboration, we can elevate our applied science programs to equip students with the right knowledge to make contributions to society. But we only have a 40% non-local student quota, right? It has been increased to 40%, right? If I remember correctly, Professor. Well, for self-financing institutions, it should be 20% at most. Right, okay. So first we have to equip local students with the right knowledge to make sure we can develop new quality productive forces. We're hosting forums. We are collaborating with international institutions for this very reason. It's not just about attracting students from the Belt and Road countries to come to Hong Kong. We do have the Belt and Road Scholarship for that. We need to make sure non-local students are getting the right education, but more importantly, we need to make sure locals are getting the right education they need. Thank you.
Now, one comment from me. For self-financing institutions, they have a different cap when it comes to mainland Macau and Taiwan students on the one hand and overseas students on the other. So altogether, 20%, I think. Thank you. The 20% cap applies to MMT students, mainland Macau and Taiwan students. The cap is 20%, whereas for other places, non-MMT, there's no cap. Self-financing institutions admit mostly mainland students for non-local students. Now, some institutions still require approval, and they have yet to secure such an approval from the Ministry of Education in taking mainland students. Education is not a business. It's not about making a huge profit. Having non-local students in Hong Kong gives local students exposure to their peers from far and wide. You can have a multicultural learning experience on the campus, and that's good for local students. As we try to attract non-local students to pursue studies here and work here, we also set great store by nurturing local students. Now, for self-financing institutions, the cap is 20%. What about for UGC-funded universities? For UGC-funded universities, the cap for non-local students is 40%, and that applies to all non-local students, mainland and overseas. Yes, inclusive. For the 8 UGC-funded universities, they have more non-local students than self-financing ones. Now, on international exposure, enriching the learning experience of local students, it shouldn't be just about attracting non-local students. We should also do overseas exchange and internships for local students. Do you run those programs? An assistant of mine said they did a French program and then they pursued a program in France. That qualification was awarded by a French university. So does the Education Bureau have plans for those overseas programs? The 8 UGC-funded universities also offer overseas exchange programs. We have a goal. In the 2025 academic year, we want half of our students have access to overseas exchange programs. The programs vary in length. Some last a semester, others last somewhere between 6 months and a year. That's up to individual universities. But the UGC does provide funding for universities to arrange such exchange programs. Mrs. Ip. I still believe this paper should go to a panel meeting instead. I think we have covered pretty much everything for efforts to turn Hong Kong into an international education hub. I blocked 2 hours in my diary for this discussion, and we have covered all the bases. We have just 2 members here. So can we wrap up the meeting here so that we don't take up people's time? I just came from a meeting of the Executive Council. VPAT is an integral part of our efforts to become an international education hub. I've asked members to ask questions related to this hub. The global trend in education is that traditional academic universities are gradually converging with institutions offering more vocationally oriented programs. Research, academic, and industry collaboration is very much about application. After a while, you cannot really tell the difference between the academic stream and the vocational stream. For Hong Kong to become an IEH, we cannot just look at composite universities. UASs may be in demand among students from Southeast Asia. The situation may be trickier in the mainland because the classification of industries in Hong Kong may be different from that in the mainland. Because mainland institutions still have to secure approval from the Ministry of Education. Now, if there are no other questions and we have no other business, I will adjourn the meeting here. The Secretariat will let you know the date of the next meeting, and I will talk to the government about that. Thank you.